as that is concerned as well, and looking at the high cost of living and how people are adjusting as well. We're joined this morning by Engineer Patrick Obath, who is the chair of KEPSA Foundation, also with Professor Gituro Wanaina, who is a lecturer at the School of Business, University of Nairobi. We'll be joined much later also by Shemo Chodo. Dr. Shemo Chodo is the chair of Kenya Diaspora Alliance. So we have a lot lined up for you. Make sure also you head over to our Twitter handle, or our X handle right now as it is, and it is at KTN News. Mine is at Dibalanea. You can actually air your views, fire your questions, and we shall be also sampling them much later in the course of the program. But for now, let's see what is fresh off the press today. And it's all about AFCON and how the East African region has won this particular bid is what is headlining the front page of the Standard today. Real hard work to AFCON 2027 begins. This is what is on the front page of the Standard. Make or break, it says here. Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania's joint bid to host the Africa Cup of Nations in 2027 was yesterday accepted. The heavy lifting starts with the refurbishment of stadiums, serious investment in training grounds and talent injection in national teams. You have a story on page 4 and 5, and of course we shall be giving you also greater details of that in our news bulletin just momentarily. And we have a bite here from CS Ababu Namwamba, who says, as East Africans, we are one. A single passport, we speak one language, that's Kiswahili. We have a common agenda, and hosting this tournament is such a big shot in the arm for integration. AFCON 2027 begins. That is the real hard work begins right now. On the sidebar, DP struggles to fit in Ruto's former shoes. That is the story that you want to follow. 1 year later, the deputy president, it says the deputy president's scorecard sees him earning points from milk and tea farmers, but flopping on coffee and illicit alcohol wars in central Kenya. This is a story that you want to follow on page 8 of the Standard today. And admittedly, he has actually said that fighting or stanching the flow of corruption inside the coffee sector, it's not a ticker, right? It's hard work, and he's being fought very hard. Blows to Ruto as MPs question education report. That story continues on page 7. Concerns were raised by Mhaya, member of parliament there, who is also member of the education committee in parliament, Milembe Omboko, and you can follow the story on page 7 of the Standard this morning. Also, fresh pain as cement prices go up, right? That is on business pages, and that is on page 18. We shall be looking at this. Remember, also the Kenya Association of Manufacturers had moved to court to challenge the export levy investment levy that is bound to make this particular sector see the clinker and the cement prices going up, and this is bound to affect also the real estate, where we can see prices of houses and constructions will go up. That is the story you want to follow inside the Standard this morning. Click, ban, dicey nature of bar photos, right? We've seen also the Data Protection Act coming heavily on people who are violating it. And this is a story you want to follow inside the Standard today, how a club and a school have suffered heavily, paying fines because of violating the Data Protection Act, and they're paying the consequences, their copyrights. That is the heavy story that you want to follow there inside the Standard this morning. Also, remember, the real estate comes your way every Thursday. Get all the wiser as far as land buying is concerned. Why land is a big hurdle to affordable housing. And also there's still another land bill that is in the offing right now that seeks to streamline that particular sector. And you can read all about it also inside the Standard this morning. Daily Nation is here. It's coming home. That is a splash. AFCON 2027, the flagger football extravaganza. It says Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania's joint bid to host the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations was yesterday given a green light by the Confederation of African Football, signaling the continental body's confidence in the three countries' capability to hold the tournament, the first in the region since 1976 in Ethiopia. But If the hard work doesn't start now, we may lose out once again. This story continues on page 2, 3, 46 and 47 of the Daily Nation. And you can see how yesterday the good news was being received. Insert there, President William Ruto, Sports Cabinet Secretary Babu Namwamba, and FKF President Nick Mwendwa during the unveiling of East African Community's Pamoja bid for the Africa Cup of Nations 2027 on May 15th in Nairobi. Follow the story inside the Daily Nation this morning. And this is also a picture that is related there. Confederation of African Football President Patrice Motsepe announcing the host countries for the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations yesterday in Cairo. The 2027 tournament will be jointly hosted by Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, while Morocco will host the 2025 edition. And you can follow this story inside the Daily Nation this morning. On the sidebar, windfall. Before we go to the sidebar, Mudama, Demo, and 1 billion shillings fraud in Konza. On the state, as President William Ruto's administration plans to pick up the pace of the Konza Technopolis project, a recent court decision has revealed that Kenya's flagship tech hub is built on a foundation of fraud that was planned and aided by senior government officials. Now, on July the 4th, in a decision that went largely unnoticed, Justice Lawrence Mugambi delivered a stinging indictment of Kenya's criminal justice system, as he noted that the fraud scheme's masterminds, based on the evidence presented to him during trial, managed to use the courts to wriggle out of prosecution. And you have the story on page 7, and Ambassador Bitangen Demo and the chair, this is also the former senator, Johnston Mudama, are in the crosshairs right now. You can follow this story inside the Daily Nation this morning. Also, we have on the sidebar, windfall. Tea farmers set for bonus next month. The final bonus payment to over 75,000 or 750,000 tea farmers is expected to be disbursed next month. The announcement was made by Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, who revealed that KTDA factories earned 95.3 billion shillings in 2023. You can follow the story on the back page of the Daily Nation. Also, teenager in Maigo murder case to be held for 21 days. Ruto, we've written off 117 billion shillings ordered to state by sugar mills. That is a story to want to follow on page 6. The government has written 117 billion shillings ordered to it by state-owned sugar companies in preparation to lease out the mills to private players. President William Ruto said this yesterday. You can follow the story inside the Daily Nation. This is how it looks. The Star. Kenya wins big with the 2027 AFCON rights. That is the splash as well. Coming home, biggest continental football bonanza returns to East Africa after 51 years. It will be the 36th edition of the competition and will be hosted by 3 countries in the first time, or for the first time, I should say. And this story is on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. It's all smiles there, as Confederation of African Football yesterday awarded Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania the rights to jointly host the 2027 AFCON edition. You can follow the story on page 32 of the Star. Prepare for higher sugar prices. That is a warning there, as shortage hits Mombasa market. A sugar crisis looming following the acute shortage of the commodity in the Mombasa market. The shortage is expected to further increase sugar prices in the coming months following the government's ban on sugar cane milling in Western Kenya and Nyando sugar belt. That story is on page 10. And MPs saying no to Ruto's education reforms, halt implementation. The National Assembly yesterday stopped the rollout of President William Ruto's education reforms, insisting that implementation of recommendations before MPs' approval amounts to usurping the powers of the August House. The move now throws the education sector into untold confusion. And you have a story continuing on page 6 of the Star this morning. On top there, more pain for workers as state mounts a fresh slew of taxes. That is a social health bill. You can read all about it inside page 2 of the Star this morning, amongst other taxes, all that tucked away inside the Star. As we buckle down to business daily, this is what is the splash today. Cash outs at banks hits an all-time high of 273.4 billion shillings. That is what is holding as the splash this morning. New July peak attributed to rushed state pending. Disbursement offer cash flow relief to contractors. A story there by Kefa Mwerure. You can follow it on page 3. And just to read a snippet of it, they're saying that cash circulating outside banks hit an all-time high of 273.4 billion shillings in July in the wake of rushed government spending at the end of financial year in June, easing the cash flow pain for contractors, suppliers, and their employees. Data from the Central Bank of Kenya show the cash outside banks rose from 257.9 billion shillings in June to the highest level under President William Ruto's administration and surpassed the previous peak of 267.7 billion shillings set in July last year. That story continues apace on page 3 of the Business Daily this morning. Procurement watchdog flags fresh Kenya Power meter tenders. That is the story that you want to follow about meters tenders there. The public procurement watchdog has directed Kenya Power to explain why it awarded a new electricity meter supply tender to a firm that failed to fully honor a previous contract 3 years ago. The Public Procurement Regulatory Authority, in a letter to Kenya Power Managing Director Joseph Siror, pointed out that the firm Smart Meters Technology Limited had an order to supply 91,000 smart meters by July 24, 2020, but had not done so, as evidenced by a purchase order report. Smart Meters Technology is among 4 local companies that have been awarded a new lucrative 5.4 billion shillings tender to deliver 711,740 smart electricity meters, raising questions on the legality of the decision because the company was yet to fully deliver meters from a previous contract by Kenya Power. And this story continues on page 3 of the Business Daily this morning. NHIF staff get 1-year grace period to reapply for jobs. Employees of the National Health Insurance Fund have a 1-year transition window before reapplying for jobs when the 57-year-old state agency is split into 3 outfits as part of planned reforms. That story is on page 4. And Kengen to pay 2 billion shillings as debt battle continues. The High Court has directed electricity producer Kengen to pay 1.98 billion shillings to a firm seeking billions of shillings from Geothermal Development Corporation in a botched contract. And bank earnings margins of up to 10% in forex transactions. Kenyan banks are earning margins of up to 10.5% on foreign currency transactions, benefiting from increased demand for hard currencies. And you can follow the story inside the Business Daily as well. And we can head over to Uganda, where also Ugandans are celebrating the new win that we have bagged as an East African community. AFCON coming home is what is displayed in the Daily Monitor. What it took to win the bid, where Ugandans can make AFCON cash, what the award means to Uganda, what Uganda needs to be ready, what Uganda needs to be ready. That is the what about question there on the front page of the Daily Monitor in Uganda. And the Pamoja bid, you can see some of the officials there. The East African National Board there. All right, well, it says the East African Nationals beat Egypt, I should say. It's not very legible on my end. So I'll just read all. I will let the rest of the details for you to decipher there. That is the Daily Monitor. Congolese musician Fally Ipupa faces arrest in Uganda, and government plans to upgrade 3 airports. All that's happening in Uganda. In Tanzania, hiring of state entity heads under scrutiny. Recent blunders in the process of appointing head of state-owned enterprises have put the current system firmly under the spotlight, with some observers calling for hiring to be overseen by an independent body. This story continues on page 2 of the Citizen this morning. TANESCO chief, my priorities in the next 6 months. And also, it's coming home. That is a story on the front page of the Citizen as well. in Tanzania is all about the AFCON bid, and everyone is saying it's coming home. MSD unveils plan to slash medicine imports. You can follow the story inside the Citizen this morning. In Rwanda, UNESCO's 10 ethics on artificial intelligence use. Government predicts an ecosystem worth for $589 million in the next 5 years. This story continues on page 5 of the New Times. And EAC needs new tech to tackle emerging disease. This is what Minister Nsazimana is saying. And there was a conference there. You can see him here delivering his remarks during the 9th East African Health and Scientific Conference in Kigali. And we have also him telling delegates that East Africa needs to access and embrace emerging technologies and innovations to prepare and respond to diseases and emerging pandemics. This story continues on page 3 of the New Times. Kanyonzi, livestock farmers bothered by Sesefly threats, and how will dedicated bus lanes impact public transport in Kigali? That is the question. All that tucked away inside today's New Times. In the East African this week is all about the 4th. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has said he will run for a 4th term in 2024, with critics putting him in club of African big men who cling on to power. That is on page 10 of East African. Why Somalia wants ATMIS drawdown halted, and Ruto Kagame are seeking deals with US investors from sports to transport and tech. East African leaders make crucial links on the sidelines. You can read all about it on page 4 and 5 of East African this week. China Daily is talking about industrial profits rebounding there in August. Bowing recovery, experts supportive measures will accelerate trend, significantly boost market confidence, and also celebrations end in tragedy. This is the outcome of the inferno there, the devastation that happened during a wedding, and officials can actually auditing, or they stand on Wednesday at the site of a fatal fire in Iraq's Nineveh province. As many as 114 people were killed and more than 200 were injured when the huge fire broke out in a wedding hall on Tuesday night. The provincial authorities said on Wednesday fireworks used during the wedding celebrations likely triggered the deadly blaze, according to media reports. And they have the story on page 6 of the China Daily today. Protectionism, a mistake, ex-Irish PM is saying, and you can read all about it inside the China Daily. And also, there is a smart paper boy, and you can see a visitor picking up a newspaper on Tuesday from a delivery robot at the main media center of the 19th Asian Games in Hangzhou, Zhejiang province. The application of high-end technologies, including 5G and artificial intelligence, has been a prominent feature on the Grand Sports gathering. And this is the new wave of technology that is bound to also take over some jobs as well, even the newspaper vending. That is what is happening this morning in some of the dailies as well. I shall be showing you what we do have on the rest of our dailies this morning, but allow me just to show you the faces of our panelists this morning who are going to take us through the conversations on the state of the economy this morning. I'm holding court, as I've mentioned earlier, if you're joining us, with Engineer Patrick Obath, who is the chair of KEPSA Foundation. Also, we do have with us Professor Gituro Wanaina, who is a professor at the University of Nairobi School of Business, and Dr. Shemo Cholo, who is a chair of Kenya Diaspora Alliance. Right, Professor, I can see you smiling. Oh, you all smiles this morning. What's making you happy? Even are you happy for
good to hear
us really bagging
see our faces? They know who these guys are. But thank you for that.
Yeah. Good morning.
Morning.
I thought maybe you're happy also that you after 51 years at least now, we can get to celebrate and have the tournaments and make our economy be stimulated a bit.
The AFCON, yes. Let's see how it goes. Interesting to have the three countries hosting the tournament. By perspective, I see it more of bringing us together, as the minister is pointing out, but also the returns in it, because it's a business in one or the other. Mm-hmm. The people selling, the hotels, the food. So from that perspective, I think it's great. And also the ladies, you know, they knocked Cameroon with the penalty, so they also headed for big things. But what is important is that if we can bring the level of football, every weekend guys are so clear who is playing who in the European League, that we need to bring that football, the Kandenge time and all that, and enjoy. It's a weekend out after the whole week of work and enjoy football. I have a young man and really impressed by him. He learned actually, he did his master's in football.
He did his master's in football?
Yeah, coaching.
Oh, football coaching.
Coaching
okay.
in the UK. And now he is supporting Goma in terms of bring talents to the teams. And I wish him well. Those are the young people we need so that we can bring the teams up to the standard.
I thought also you'd be happy that you can pick up your rackets right now to go and play squash. That'll be fun.
That is a game done by on mornings, so we enjoy it in the mornings. But that Sundays, interesting. I don't know whether
Sundays Patrick Obathi is having a club. He's on the golf course as well. But just looking at how big this is, and we shall be also just getting details momentarily. But from the sports fraternity and the sports economy, everyone is really celebrating. They expect such a stimulation that will come to this, but also in the spirit of integration of East African community, sporting can be one of a very strong cementing element.
There's a lot that can be gained from this award of the AFCON to the three countries. And when you look at just the staging logistics, first of all, how are they going to get from one country to another easily? It means there has to be a common visa that allows them to easily travel. Otherwise, if they have to go through the visa process every time, so there was this idea of having a tourist visa for East Africa, which somehow is not fully working. That must be made to work so that this event is used to test it, make it work, and so forth. So beyond that event, we have that common visa as a standard thing that is available to stimulate that sector in the future. So I think as we look at the AFCON, there are a lot of things that need to be put into place for this that should continue beyond the event. So that common visa is the first one. If we had a common currency, it would have been nice. That is either these guys are going to be exchanging money every time they move from one country to another, which is expensive for them. But is there something that is this something that you can move towards that will make it easier for these people to work and operate within East Africa, right? And if it goes beyond that, I mean, this is dreaming wildly, yeah. If we are able to get a common way of working the currency, at least maybe an interim measure with a kind of an, of a controlled exchange rate between the three countries' currencies, which is the first stage normally towards having a common currency, is to establish a way of exchanging between them, and then eventually you then choose one. So that's another thing that we should be looking to achieve during AFCON. And the other thing is just the ability to move between the countries in terms of the transport infrastructure. If I was to go from Kenya to Dar es Salaam to Kampala and so forth in between the three, how many flights are there? How cost effective are they, right? The cost of traveling in East Africa between the national capitals is very high, relatively speaking. So this, what do they call them, bilateral air service agreements, whatever, we need to really sort that out between the three countries so that the cost of flying is reduced. Otherwise, the cost of moving these people around, which is going to be our cost, it's not their cost, it's our cost, is going to be very high. And the budgets that you're going to have in the countries are going to be phenomenal. So I see this as, it's great that it's coming, and it's a great sport thing, but we need to take advantage of it to change how we relate as three countries. But as a country in Kenya, there's one more thing that needs to happen. Countries elsewhere in the world that have hosted major sporting events have used the build-up to that event as a means of promoting the development of that sport in the country. So football has had a very checkered and messy history in this country. And you know, we're good books, and all of a sudden there is infighting within the federation, and the teams don't agree and so forth. So it is now a time when we can streamline that, so that by the time AFCON comes this side, we have a team that has been developed, through the process, that can make a proper bid to win. But that is not around just getting people at the top. We need to create at this time a sort of, a bottom-up process that allows, that is structured in such a way that you're working at the grassroots, and you're now beginning to set up a system that football will grow from the grassroots up to the apex, with the sole objective of getting new talent to be able to serve the country during AFCON. So I think there's a lot of opportunities that this brings out, not just the staging of it and and the glamour and everything else, but in terms of just developing the game and developing the region. Yeah.
Right, and of course the scale of preparation. I know you've had a snippet when it comes to Magical Kenya and preparing for the golf tournaments, how rigorous it is as well. If there is any silent lesson we can pick up previously on being woefully inadequate as a country in terms of preparation, because I think we had this bit before, or was it the CA? I think it was a CAF, and we as a country had no sufficient stadium. We were not prepared for it again. Yet we had won the bid, and then it was taken away from us. What lessons can we learn from there?
I think infrastructure is not something that is something that this kind of thing should encourage. If you look at South Africa, when they staged the World Cup, they actually spent the time after they won the bid. What they did was to put infrastructure in the country, and they did it big. That infrastructure for some years was not used, and now has really has really become important in the development of sports. Here you have 3 countries. Yeah, you're going to have, I don't know how many football teams coming. I haven't looked at it in detail, but they will need at least in each country about 3 to 4 stadia that can host events, i.e. 3 that are doing it and 1 spare. You need practice facilities around the stadium where these guys can go and warm up and do things like that. The facilities that are present in terms for spectators, what have you, all that has got to be top notch, because the whole of Africa and the rest of the world will be watching those matches, and TV cameras wander in all sorts of places that you would never expect it to wander. When something happens or people are doing something, the camera will catch a particular place, and if they find broken furniture in that area, that is what people will remember. They won't remember the
that will be the story.
That becomes the story. Yeah. So infrastructure is key.
Yeah.
But also, I think the procurement process. I think we have to come back into that. The procurement process to make sure that we are getting value for money, because the hosting of those people, the place they're going to stay, is going to be paid for by these countries. And therefore, in terms of making sure that they've got a comfortable accommodation, areas where they can practice in the morning, gyms where they can warm up and so forth, the right kind of nutrition and everything else, that has to be done so early and vetted, so that you vet everybody with a very stringent process. In the Kenya Open, when we did the Magical Kenya Open, we do that. We sort of say how many hotels want to come and bid. We go and check them from the kitchen forward. So we assure that people are not going to get food poisoning. Right. And we go through that whole process with every single thing, the transport guys that we look at. We look at the kind of buses they have long before we even invite them to bid. And then we look at their safety standards, we look at all those. So the process of getting to a standard that we are saying we are comfortable hosting people is a long one. And we really need to do it honestly, without what our agencies are famous for, escalating costs and everything, and people making money out of it. Yes, let people make money, but let them make money out of it in a manner that is transparent, that is that actually gives value and makes the country proud. That is the key thing.
And I think the point you're making here,
just a moment before you go on profile, so that we can hear the voice of Dr. Shemo Chwodo.
They need to tap in people who have organized, like him or that. The learning. It's just not football, the organization. You need to tap people who have experience. I think that's the take I'm taking from about here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Experience. I wonder what Dr. Shemo Chwodo has experience in what sports.
Indeed, of course, sports tech.
Football.
Sports tech.
Sports tech.
And esports.
And esports.
They had the elections the other day.
But Debal, just before that, allow me to join colleagues and Kenyans and East Africans generally to celebrate what's happened and compliment CS Babu Namwamba and the football fraternity and the other counterparts in the EAC region, at least in the two other countries, for having secured this opportunity. I could add that apart from the benefits that would come with this, naturally, tourism would be one of the sectors to benefit from this. You would expect a flurry of inflows into the EAC region, into that, to celebrate the duration, the sports, the games that will be taking place. A good friend based at the Hollywood, a Ugandan, has been always saying, look, in terms of the film industry, creative industry, I prefer, instead of promoting just Uganda as a destination, do it for the East EAC. So this is a very good opportunity for that to be actualized. But the part of why am I talking about sport tech and esports? I recently met a young Kenyan girl who actually is a FIFA consultant. As we are talking, she just moved from South Africa to North Africa, inspecting stadia. Barely 30-year-old young girl, Kerubo, Violet. And I was amazed that, Kenyans, in particular, a majority of Africans, still playing the very old thorax sport. And she was intimating that I think a country in the in Scandinavia, I think it's Sweden, if I'm not mistaken, has been winning lately. I don't know if it's rugby or hockey, one of the games. They don't ordinarily have physically some of the strongest, but they use data analytics. They know that if you make so many passes, you're likely to break through your competitors. So sport technology in this regard is a major issue, and it's very varied. It ranges from what are the kind of shoes our athletes use, what are the kind of tactics and strategies they use to win. If we realize that this is a science, not just an art, it's an art, yes, but it's also a science. If we bring data into it, into sports tech, that's one way to go. And a major opportunity, of course, for making money, legitimate money. I was very happy to see Mount Kenya University, I think now rebranded in Rwanda as Mount Kigali University, introducing esports. I must admit that I'm also learning. But that's itself, there are people who make millions of dollars from esports. So my advice to the sport fraternity, yes, it's good that we have the look at sport in the traditional sense, but let's go beyond that. Let's also think of almost everything is being transformed by the digital world. Lastly, Debal, in terms of the stadia being constructed, there are the professionals, and some of them are Kenyans. As I've mentioned, there is this young girl. In fact, she was narrating a case where I don't know whether it was Nyayo Stadium or other stadium in Ruaraka, was being constructed. And I think as a casual, concerned Kenyan, she told people involved that this is not meeting the FIFA standards. There are certain ABC things to be done. Let's listen to professionals. And as our colleagues have said, let's do this right. Let there be value for money, governance, we've had a bad reputation of abusing resources. Let this not be an avenue for squandering resources. Let's do it so well. And there could be no better gift for the Kenya Kwanza if they deliver 2027 AFCON very well.
Right. We want to come to the, of course, from the academia as well, and how they can prepare for that part of the conveyor belts as is feeding the sports economy as well, and also how artificial intelligence can also come very largely into the sports fraternity, because the world is headed there. Recently there was a young boy who was asked, what do you want to become when you grow up? And he said, a footballer. And I said, wow, in Kenya, these young boys and girls are realizing what sports can do for them, not what ties anymore can do for us. It's actually changing the way and the nature of the economy, mostly in the gig economy. And this is where Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania will benefit by hosting the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations. The decision for the East African countries to host the Continental Showpiece was announced in Cairo, Egypt. The Pamoja bid beat individual bids from Botswana, Egypt, and Senegal favorites to host the competition. Algeria withdrew from the race a day before the hosting vote was conducted. It is the first time 3 countries will be hosting the competition, although twice before joint bids involving 2 countries have sailed through.
Has voted for to host the AFCON 2027 is
we have a common agenda, and hosting this tournament together for me is such a big shot in the arm for integration.
Tanzania, Kenya na Uganda tumeshinda kwa kishindo. Tumeshinda kwa sababu serikali zetu 3 zikiongozwa na marais wote watatu wameonyesha commitment ya hali ya juu kabisa katika kuandaa ligi hii ya pamoja. Lakini pia mawaziri watatu, waziri wa michezo wa Tanzania, waziri wa michezo Kenya, waziri wa michezo Uganda, wote tumekuwa hapa kupambania ushindi huu.
Many people never believed that we had a chance of hosting AFCON in 2027 because of the state of our football and the state of our sports in general. But I am very proud today that Kenya, together with our partners in Uganda and Tanzania, jointly we have won the right to host AFCON in 2027, and we are very proud of this achievement. We will now mobilize every resource. We will mobilize every person and every sector to make sure that we deliver a world-class football event in 2020.
All right, let me just hear from Professor Kituro Wanaina. Even as the president was really celebrating that, does he remember when he was campaigning in 2013 that he promised Kenya stadiums? Within 6 months, at least, we'll be having stadiums, national stadiums as well. It will have really come handy right now that we are having this particular celebrations that we can host the tournament.
Yeah, interesting question, and sort of put me on the spot. And
why on the spot? You are not the one who was to build the stadium. Why should you be on the spot?
I cannot contradict what the president is saying, that we'll give a first class in terms of the games. But let's be honest about it. There have been some tremendous progress. When you listen to Kip Keino Stadium, by the way, it's a very interesting. He just turned 85 last Saturday, and congrats to Kip Keino. He's an interesting man. He played a part of Uhuru being born when Kenyatta was in Kapenguria. That's a story for another day.
You can give us a bit of history.
Sorry?
Yeah, we can benefit from that history.
But he was a police officer, and he was one guarding at Kapenguria. But you make efforts that Mama Ngina will sneak in and the rest is history. A very interesting man, and one thing, and I come to that because to me, he's the ultimate of sports in this country. He has translated through Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, Moi, Kibaki, all the presidents we have. But you don't hear him having all these hurabarus, a gentleman, as we would say. With the efforts, and this is where the government realizes how much leveraging with the private sector comes in terms of even as a 3 years. 3 years is not so much, actually 4 years. How do the government, as the president really promised in the show yesterday, and include the private sector? And I always look at him as a good example. They have managed Magical Kenya Golf so well. And if you look at the whole organization, I would say there's very little in terms of government taking on the responsibility, but providing an environment where it makes possible. So it's, despite what the president said, as they came in, and then we have to face reality, there were things they didn't need to do. But it's possible that we can deliver it in terms of that. Really mobilizing the resources the president is saying, it's not necessarily financial, but what are brains behind it? The guy next to my right, immediate right, Patrick, without due respect, he can actually give all this pro bono. And there are people willing to do that to make it work. So in my view, despite the promise that we'll have addressed 10 of them, there's still opportunity to move it forward. But looking at also for as academic, as you had said earlier on, there's an interesting paper which was done in 1985 by the UN, how sports create peace, brings nation together. And that's how we should be looking at it. But very important, if you look at the key, and I give the example of the Serena Williams sisters, or this guy of the Lakers. You know, they actually, after the sport, they went back to school. So it'd be possible to combine both. Even the young lady doing fantastic in tennis, it's possible to combine that. The football the same. But to answer your question, yes, as a nation we can, and believing that the glass is half full.
Allow me just to interrupt you because I need to sort out your mic. It's crackling a bit. So
I think let me bite the bullet. The question that
the question of the study, because it's not answered.
Because
the dissertation is somewhere else to what the question has been asked.
I think the issue of the offer that was done to build the stadium within a certain time around the country, the reason it didn't work was they were just to build stadium, but to what end? What was the objective of doing it? This time round, you have got a target and a very clear time frame by which it has to happen, and if it doesn't, there's egg in your face. The other one you can say, and if it doesn't happen, tough. It hasn't happened. So I think the key thing here is that we have a very clear target. AFCON is coming. We made a commitment. You've got 2 other partners, 2 other countries, and we all have to perform to make that happen. That will make sure that it is done now. The other time we were building, but building for what? There wasn't a clear outcome as to why the stadia were going to benefit the country in the long term, right? And we didn't have a real target that you have to meet this to be able to do X. And if you look at countries, and I'll use my golf as an example because I know that well. A country like Ireland, they decided that they were going to host the World Golf Championships 8 years from the time they bid. And within that time, they made sure that there were sufficient golf courses that could host the event. They also made sure that the transportation infrastructure, the accommodation, whatever it is, was all done. But key was that they actually began a program from the junior level. And you find the people like Rory McIlroy, who's now top in the world and so forth and so on, they all came out as a result of the fact that they took advantage of this target of hosting this event to grow their talent. Yeah? And you find that Irish golf has since begun is booming. You know, every year or every other year, there's a star coming out of that country. So the objective of building the stadia in 2013 or whatever it is that they said they're going to build so many stadia should have been done with the objective of achieving something. Either saying that you're going to, you know, we're going to win AFCON within the next 10 years. And therefore the stadia are going to be the area where we're building talent, and you track the activity that is happening as a result of building the stadia. So I think that at that time it was a great idea, it was a great political thing to say that we're going to do these things. And there's a lot of promises that were made, yeah? You remember the computers, the laptops for every kid, whatever it is, and so forth. But to what was the objective at the end of that promise? Yeah? The laptop for every child. What was it going to achieve? Was that cast in stone? Was somebody going to follow it up? I don't think so. So I think, yeah, this time around, we'll make it because we have an objective. But those times,
so we're under pressure.
So
we're under pressure to deliver because now we've announced to the world that we'll be hosting. It will be such a shameful moment for us if we find ourselves woefully inadequate and ill-prepared.
But that pressure, who can do better than the people in the private sector? And there's a point. Bring people who can deliver. The government will take the responsibility of quality assurance, but less people who can deliver in terms, and they can deliver even in 3 years or 2 years.
Well, there are people also in government who can deliver. Let's be honest. It's just a question of getting a system that allows people to perform without interference. That's the key thing. And in private sector, all you do is there's people who are given the job and they move on.
Right.
And if the government does exactly the same, and you can have it jointly.
That's what I meant.
And just let, give a team the responsibility, make sure you supervise them and you whip them and
look for sponsorship. People who advertise in that whatever. So the money is not an issue here. They're very organized stuff. Yeah.
All right.
There's the mention of Kipchoge Keino, obviously an outstanding sportsman. Incidentally, his daughter is one of the young people promoting sport technology in the country, and I'm glad she is tracing the footsteps of the dad. But allow me, we can't also forget what the GOAT did.
Which daughter, Irene Keino? Or
over the weekend in Berlin, Yeah. He keeps making us proud. There are these sports people who do fabulous. They're probably the best ambassadors, really, that we have. But Debal, you also mentioned a young man that said wants to be a footballer. My own son. When young, he said, "Dad, I want to be a footballer." Dad and mom had wanted him to be an aeronautics engineer or things like that, or lawyer. Well, then eventually...
There's a word you use. What?
Well, apart from being a footballer, he also said, "I want to be a musician." So eventually we convinced him to go into university to do law. He said, "Well, Dad and Mom, I'll do that to make you happy. But what I'll study copyright law." Clearly, his mind was set in the creative industry.
The creative industry, yes.
So you can see even when we were pushing him in one direction, his thinking was still sport, creatives, and all that. And there are people who make it that way and is doing reasonably well in that regard. So obviously, this is one major area where the young people can make tidy income. I'm glad that among the big five, the bottoms-up economic transformation agenda, the BETA as it's called, the 5 key areas, the fourth one or the fifth one is digital and creatives industry. In fact, some of the sports people have been talking to us saying, look, why don't we just make sport as distinct instead of making sport as part of creatives? For me, I said, well, it wouldn't matter whatever we call it, as long, somebody said it doesn't matter whether it's a white or black dog, a cat, as long as it catches the rat. So sometimes, as long as you get what you want within the framework of the digital and creatives industry. But lastly, in this regard, Debal, even as we build the infrastructure, we must also think beyond AFCON. What are we going to use this study and the infrastructure that we put in place for, so that we get most value? It should be the real beginning of reactivating, as Professor was saying. Can we start churning out the kadenges of this world?
Indeed.
Not in the traditional sense, but the ones that are data-driven.
Right. Of course, even we can try and juxtapose the issue of the sports and academia, where there is a standoff brewing between the government and principals of public schools over management of billions of shillings disbursed to schools. A circular by Basic Education Principal Secretary Belio Kipsang on the release of a free-day secondary education funds for Term 3 has directed all county directors of education to demand accountability of the money dispersed. The teachers' unions have protested, I should say, the directive, arguing the government is demanding for accountability of what has not been released to schools. Shadrach Biti has more.
The circular dated September 19th and addressed to all county directors of education by Basic Education Principal Secretary Belio Kipsang on the release of free-day secondary education for Term 3 is causing jitters among school principals. According to the letter, allocation per student is 4,002 shillings. Accordingly, the Minister of Education has also remitted to KICD and Semester 100 shillings and 40 shillings per learner to cater for textbooks and capacity building, respectively, from the tuition account. Another 650 shillings per learner has been remitted to the NHIF from the operations account to cater for medical insurance. And to further show its intention to tighten the noose and ensure accountability, the Minister of Education has demanded that school principals issue official school receipt to the Principal Secretary for Basic Education, covering both tuition and operation accounts.
Under the Public Financial Management Act and School Financial Regulations, principals and accounts only account for funds received and used by their institutions. Where the government spends funds on behalf of schools, accountability for such expenditures lies with the Ministry of Education and the recipient agencies, not secondary schools.
Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers, KUPPET, has protested the directive, arguing the government is demanding for accountability from teachers over funds they did not receive. The union is particularly questioning why the Minister of Education is demanding that principals acknowledge receipt of 4,002 shillings per learner for the third term of 2023, when only 3,187 shillings per learner was remitted to schools.
Ministry of Schools, Kenya shillings 105 per learner for the last financial year that ended on 30th June 2023. Ministry of Schools, a further 5,561 per learner for the first quarter of the current financial year. Cumulatively, this comes to approximately 19 billion that schools are yet to receive.
While the letter by Education Principal Secretary Dr. Belio Kipsang says the Minister of Education has released free-day secondary education funds for Term 3 of 2023, principals insist the monies released on September 19th partially offset the arrears owed from the last financial year of 2022-2023.
For the avoidance of doubt, information from principals indicates that schools have not received any capitation funds for third term of 2023. The 3,187 remitted on 19 September partially offset the arrears owed from the last financial year 2022-2023.
The government is demanding that principals must have individual students sign form lists that show their admission numbers, full names and full amount awarded to every learner. Instructively, the principals have 2 weeks to complete the exercise, failure to which release of grants to the schools will be suspended or completely miss out on the free-day secondary education disbursements. Shadrach Biti, KTN News.
Indeed, and of course, matters academia there regarding the state of funding as it is. What is circle back? We shall look at it, and also the new development that we have from the floor of the House, who are now starkly denying the shaking into place of the Presidential Working Party report, saying that the government is usurping the powers of the National Assembly, that it has to be interrogated by them before any installation of new policies are being installed. We take a short break. When we circle back, we shall be looking at that and a raft of other issues as well, as far as economy is concerned, looking at the editorial cartoons. Very interesting. Today, Garo has drawn this It's all about artificial intelligence. Should we be worried about autonomous weapons that could wipe out population on their own? If Madaraka may just pick up this as we take a short break. Shouldn't we put a pause on artificial intelligence, introduce a moratorium until we figure out things, and that will be impeding human progress? There's a conversation going on there. Well, he's not putting it up. We shall pick it up on the other side of a break and interrogate also how artificial intelligence is bound to affect our academia and every facet of our life. Don't go away.